from New York, on the beaches of the Florida Panhandle today, children playing in the sand and in the water. But look closer, reported the Associated Press, and you might see that their plastic shovels were scooping up clumps of goo in the waves. Our fifth story, the BP oil leak catastrophe today arriving in Pensacola with the tide. At this hour, deep below the Gulf of Mexico's surface, the broken oil well still gushing, the wait continuing for the containment cap to siphon off more than a fraction of the crude, now spoiling the shores of 4 American states. A BP executive saying this afternoon that it's going to take a couple of days to manage the pressure on the capped well. Engineers must slowly close the valves on that cap in order to prevent a surge that could blow out the gasket. The valves there to prevent ice crystals from forming, ice crystals having rendered useless the giant containment domes that was used at the beginning of last month. For now, the cap siphoning off about 1,000 barrels a day out of the low-end estimated 19,000 barrels a day still spilling. That would be a little bit more than 5% not being spilled now. Back on shore in Pensacola, cleanup crews arriving to pick up the first tar now washing ashore there, as remarkably some sunbathers still trying to enjoy a day at the beach. Skimmer boats now working as far as 50 miles offshore to try to stop the oil from reaching land. While to the west, in Alabama, a warning issued for swimmers to stay out of the water. Federal investigators now looking into what's in the water that seems to be making cleanup workers sick. They believe the chemical dispersants are to blame. BP's chief executive, Tony Hayward, having said the workers were merely suffering from food poisoning. Protesters at BP's Washington, D.C. office calling for the prosecution of Mr. Hayward and his company. The CEO addressing the attacks today on a briefing call with investors.
I personally think it's right that I should be the lightning rod because it allows everyone else to get on with doing their job, but I've got a pretty thick Kevlar jacket and I'm so far unscathed.
Earlier this week, Mr. Hayward having claimed that there is no evidence of any underwater plumes of oil in the Gulf. University of South Florida scientists, though, working with the federal government, now saying that lab tests confirm the existence of 2 such massive layers of coagulated oil underwater. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, President Obama postponing a foreign trip later this month because of the crisis, making the second Friday visit to the Gulf in as many weeks, heading to a barrier island to visit local workers affected by the catastrophe. At a briefing, the president saying it's way too early to be optimistic about BP's latest attempt to contain the spill and attacking the company for putting its image and its shareholders ahead of Gulf residents by spending more than $50 million on an advertising campaign and paying out more than $10 billion, that's with a B, in dividend payments for just the first quarter.
I don't have a problem with BP fulfilling its legal obligations, but I want BP to be very clear. They've got moral and legal obligations here in the Gulf for the damage that has been done. And what I don't want to hear is when they're spending that kind of money on their shareholders and spending that kind of money on TV advertising, that they're nickel and diming fishermen or small businesses here in the Gulf who are having a hard time.
And that was a sentiment not only echoed today by Louisiana's Republican governor, Bobby Jindal also expressed praise for the president.
BP's done a great job sending out press releases, sending us lobbyists, sending us lawyers. They've yet to send us a dime. This is the 3rd time the president has come to Louisiana since this oil spill. Every time the president has come, we've seen an increase in activity. So we welcome his visits to come see firsthand the ongoing challenges from this oil spill in our state.
BP issuing a statement tonight that for a second month it will be making payments to some 14,000 businesses and individuals along the Gulf Coast who have lost income due to the oil disaster. BP estimates that total payments for May and June would be about $84 million. Governor Jindal today said that BP has not yet processed half of the first month's claims. In a moment, marine conservationist Rick Steiner on his aerial tour of the Gulf today. First, the politics with Ezra Klein of Newsweek and The Washington Post, now an MSNBC contributor as well. Ezra, good evening.
How are you, Keith?
The president postponing the trip to Indonesia and Australia for the second time before he went to Louisiana today, obviously well-intentioned, but is there a bad precedent to set in that? Can the White House lose either way?
Well, the White House is probably going to lose both ways a bit, but they're much more worried about domestic anger that he's not doing enough on the BP spill than Australia's anger that he's not come out there enough in his first term. So I think it's pretty clear which one they're going to choose. I mean, they are haunted by the images of Bush during Katrina as they figured out how to respond to this crisis, and they'll happily go overboard to not be tarred with the same brush.
So the response from the White House then is if you weren't there all the time at the beginning, be there nearly all the time in the middle. Is that the plan?
Right. The White House's original take on this was that this will be BP's disaster. It is not a federal matter particularly. Hopefully BP will be able to fix it, and they don't want to nationalize this problem. So they tried to stay out of it. They hoped that the initial BP efforts to fix it would work. But then when it didn't, they got caught in a different trap because it looked at people like they frankly weren't paying attention. People don't always like the president jumping into different parts of the economy, but when things go wrong, they want him there. So it's a bit of a hard balance to walk, and I think at the beginning they feel now that the public didn't sense they were walking it correctly, so now they're trying to move in the other direction. The more important thing now is that they're trying to move to a legislative response by wrapping a comprehensive energy bill into this crisis, which is, I think, the really important move here, because they're not going to win on BP in the sense that we may not be able to stop the oil spill. It's actually not in the president's power whether or not we have the technical capacity to go 5,000 meters under the ocean and shut off a pipe. But we do have the power to begin moving away from oil, and if Democrats can move the conversation there, at the end of the day, this could actually be not a good thing, but a step in the right direction for our fossil fuel consumption.
Right. The one isolated part of this that might turn into something of a victory for the ecology of not necessarily politically, but have they sensed politically that things are moving more in their direction in terms of getting that comprehensive energy bill through the Senate, particularly, and with it perhaps more and more stringent restrictions on the deep water offshore drilling that we're seeing disastrously unravel as we speak?
We saw two big moves in the last week. Number one, the president, who had been very consciously attempting to not bring energy legislation into the BP question. He did not want to seem to be pushing a controversial issue under the cover of crisis here, did begin to speak about it in Pittsburgh, did begin to say that, we can't be having these things in the next century. And then Harry Reid yesterday said that he wanted to see comprehensive energy legislation with a large offshore drilling regulatory component move in July, which I don't think he had said before. And so the question of what that legislation will be exactly is a good one. But one thing to keep in mind here, before this disaster, the big thing we were supposed to be doing on energy legislation was buying off Republicans with much more offshore drilling. Right. You will not see that deal happen now. So in that way, I think the bill has, if it does move, it's already gotten a little bit better.
The president spoke very specifically about those BP dividends. He put out the $10.5 billion figure for the first quarter. Are they setting this up for the possibility that they might be able to do something about that rather than say, please don't put out a dividend of $10 billion while you're destroying the Gulf Coast?
The stick the administration has on BP is that they can really suck them dry on this. I mean, the damage from this particular spill is going to be so massive if you include the economic damages, if you include the ecological damages, that if they really decide to go after them, I mean, they can pretty much bleed BP dry. Now, my sense is this will probably be like the AIG bonuses, where, in fact, the administration does not like to do the sort of thing where they run into the market and begin taking away people's money from them. As much as they're called socialists, they sometimes are not socialist enough for the American people's sensibility. But they are going to use the fact of these dividends to really put BP over the barrel, because BP knows that the amount of anger that's going to come at them for this is going to essentially give the administration the upper hand in any public fight over what BP should or should not be doing.
Ezra Klein of the Washington Post and Newsweek and MSNBC. As always, many thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.